Welcome to the first ever episode of the Human Design Profiles and Entrepreneurship podcast. I will be your host. My name is Chantel. I'm a 1-3 manifesting generator. I'm also a workshop facilitator for service providers and the writer and publisher of Facet, a book series for every facet of your small business journey. This podcast is an active learning experiment. It's all about how we each experience entrepreneurship on an individual level and how we satisfy our desire for self-awareness, often through human design. Every episode is a profile of a business owner and human design enthusiast. In today's case, we're interviewing a human design expert, so that's going to be really fun. Each guest is here to share how their personal profile lines influence their business journey. Today, my conversation is with Christina, who is a human design guide passionate about using the system to support parents and people who desire heart-to-heart connection and a holistic understanding of self. As a 1-3 emotional generator, Christina adores sitting and connecting deeply with others, providing support and guidance from the heart. Compassionate curiosity remains at the forefront of her ethos and helps her curate a cozy and kind space for those she meets. In addition to her work in human design, Christina is a new mom, an avid traveler, a creative, and unabashed horse girl. Have a listen while today's guest, Christina, a 1-3, shares her story while you read between the lines. Christina, welcome. I'm very excited to talk with you.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here. I love that whole intro, especially that tagline at the end. I don't know if it was meant to be punny or I just love it. Okay,
100%.
I was like, oh, I love that.
There should be a disclaimer. Every pun herein is absolutely intentional.
Perfect. That's my kind of podcast.
We are here chatting today about your profile line, about what it's like to be a 1-3. We can geek out as fellow 1-3s as well. Just want to give people a feel for how this show is going to go. Sometimes I'll be interviewing human design experts like yourself, and sometimes people more like me who are avid human design information consumers. Let's just start talking about profile first. What does 1-3 feel like for you?
Yeah, well, it's so funny that you say human design expert because I think as a first line in general, but especially as a 1-3, I don't know if I'll ever consider myself an expert.
Well, it's a big system, so that's fair.
It's a big system, but also just that insecurity of the first line of you just know in your body, you know that you don't know everything. And so it's like, I'm not an expert, but you could literally have multiple degrees in a subject and be like, oh, I'm not an expert. It's just that silly little first line insecurity piece, and not from a self-esteem place, but just knowing that there's always more information to gather and observe. That's just the ultimate truth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's going to be information for us to gather till the end of time.
Yeah, because nothing's static. It's all evolving and
Absolutely.
Things are growing and there's just so much to.
What do you remember how you first interacted with knowing you're a 1-3?
So I found human design. I can never remember the year. I remember where I was sitting. And I remember all of that, but it was either 2017 or 2018. I think it was possibly the end of 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, not that really matters, but accuracy.
That's a similar-ish timeline to when I discovered it.
Yeah.
I think
about
6 years
And then
now.
I went hard into it, and then I quit my job, and it was a whole thing. I mean, for a lot of reasons, I quit my job, loved my job, but just it wasn't the right thing. And so anyways, long story short, it was years ago, and I remember reading about the third line and being like, dang it, that's really right. And also I hate it. And also, that's really right. And the first line to me was just so obvious, right? It's part of our personality. It kind of makes sense to us. And so the first line, I was like, yeah. I'm okay, we know this. I'm a nerd. I love to read. I love to research. I've got a little bit of I don't know. All that just made sense to me. And that was kind of surface level first line understanding too. I think it makes even more and more sense to me as the years went by and I learned even more about the first line and all the characteristics and stuff. But just on the surface level, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm a first line for sure. And then the third line, I was one of those things where I just didn't really want to accept that I was, but it was true. So true. Just the trial by fire and the learning by mistake. And I don't know if you experience this too, but I typically get things right the first time I try it and I mess it up the second.
100%.
So it's I get it. I'm this has never happened to me in my life. Just for example, make a half court shot on the first try, but I if I were going to try and do it again, I would never make that shot again. It's like, it's just, the silliest things like, oh, I got this. I'm like naturally gifted at this. Maybe I'm a second line. And I, knock it out of the park the first time and then I go to recreate it. And that's when all the mistakes happen. It's the second and the third and the fourth time. And I'm just like, oh, but then,
Yes.
that's learning happens. But
It's
yeah.
so funny that you bring that up because I went to do archery for the first time
Yeah.
last Friday
You
and
kill.
I killed it. Yeah. Like I didn't quite get a bullseye, but I was touching that little inner circle. And my partner, he's done archery before and I had never done it. And I was like, yeah, but like I have this big beginner's luck thing. This is not surprising to me that on my first time I would do great. But like when I come back, it's probably not going to be as good. And I've had that experience over and over and over again. I was just telling the story just this week about the first time I played poker. I
Yeah.
did very, very well. And then I've never won ever again.
Yeah, it's so funny. I just like I think with the third line, people think the mistakes are gonna come like right away or whatever. And I'm like, no, honestly, I typically kill it the first time. It's the second time that gets me.
It's sneaky that way.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think I really resonated with it. And it was one of those pieces, like, I think from the get-go that I didn't have any qualms about really. I had to wrestle with other parts of my design, but the 1-3, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm a 1-3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that feels really familiar to me too. There's something that is like it's easier to love yourself for being a reader and a learner than it is to love yourself for making a lot of mistakes and having to try things and experience things and learn the hard way.
Well, it's just like, I think when you realize, like, when you read a piece of information about you that's like, you're designed to make mistakes. Like, you are here to hit every bump in the road. And then that serves a great purpose because you find out what doesn't work and then you can share that with other people and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, okay, so you're telling me for the rest of my life, like, this is how it's going to be. It's
Yeah.
always going to be like this. I'm not going to like mature out of these mistakes that I'm making. Like, I mean, we evolve as humans. So the mistakes I made when I was 15, I'm not, hopefully not going to make the same kinds of mistakes. It was like a 30-something-year-old. But, it talks about resiliency of the third line, all this stuff. I'm like, but sometimes I don't want to be resilient. Sometimes I have to nurse my boo-boos and get a little sad about it. And then I know I'll get back up and try again because literally it's in my bones. I have to. So, but yeah, there's just that little bit of like, oh man, okay, forever? Like forever? But then I think too, there is like a step once I started really experiencing or integrating and experimenting with my design a few years in, I feel like I kind of got to that place where everything was just what it was, And it's like this, like a state of acceptance around it that even though I didn't think I had a problem with it when I first heard about, my 1-3-ness, it still kind of triggers all those feelings, like all the things that you need to decondition from. And so I think a few years into that, I really settled into just accepting being my profile. I wonder if every profile experiences that. I think there's kind of something to reckon with no matter what your profile is. But yeah, I do feel like it took me, even though I didn't have like an obvious problem with it, like I didn't hate being a 1-3 or anything like that. Like I didn't wish to be another profile. I still feel like the deconditioning process was happening and around some of those wounds and things that come with being a 1-3. And I really settled into it a few years after I found it. Yeah.
I think you're right. There's pros and cons to every element of our charts. You're right. When you said it, I thought, is there another profile I would love to be? And no, like I can't pick one that seems like the golden profile. I really can't think of one that I would feel that way about, because they all have their quirks and their personality traits.
Yeah. I think it would be really interesting to have a second line because I don't know if that's like I can't spend a day in like another profile's shoes.
Oh, yes, definitely. A day. I could sign on to any of them for a day, but that would be such a fun experiment for us as 1-3s, right?
That sounds like a very 1-3 thing. And I think it would be kind of fun to be a 4-6, but it's funny because 1-3 and 4-6 are harmonic. So it's like, the same type of insecurity and experimentation going on just in a different way. Yeah, I think that would be fun. I really think that overall profile's been one of my favorite pieces of my design to really sit with and experiment with. I think a lot of people, when they find human design, they want to take action they want to use it as a way to grow, and rather than just kind of like, okay, settle into it and I'm going to let myself kind of grow naturally and decondition all this stuff. Like a lot of us are like, I know I did when I first found human design. I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to make my life better because I'm going to live my design. I feel like the 1-3 profile is very actionable for me just in general. And I think that with my first line, I know how to support myself really well because I understand my first line really well. And I know how to support myself when I'm like maybe going too hard in my first line, staying in research mode. It's like, okay, well, I know myself really well. I'm going to have to ultimately learn what I need to learn by getting messy in this process. And to me, like, it's one of those pieces of human design that's like so grounding because it is more actionable. And it definitely in those early days, I think I spent a lot of time like, okay, I'm going to do my thing and then I'm going to get messy. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to get messy. And now it's more like I'm just kind of living and being myself and being a 1-3. But every now and then when I hit those like generator stop points and frustration and I'm just kind of feeling blah, I know I can always go back to supporting myself by digging into my profile again and leaning into those actionable pieces of being a 1-3. That makes sense.
Yeah, totally. What you said about supporting yourself as a 1-line, as a 3-line, are there any specific rituals or routines that you have around that? What does that look like for you?
Oh man, I feel like my whole life of rituals and routines has just evaporated ever since
Okay.
I was actually thinking about it the other day where I was just like, remember when I used to do like my cards and my crystals and my journaling? Like, remember when I did that? And it's like, I don't even know what I would do. And so I really need to kind of go back into figuring out what kind of ritual and routine fits my life now. It took me a while to get out of the postpartum fog. I feel like I'm just kind of becoming a human again.
That's fair.
Yes. But yeah, I think as far as my first line, it's more just like mental reminders and affirmations, like the cards, my card deck and everything. Like that was honestly my ritual and routine, and the way I support myself is the card deck. Not necessarily, I mean, I use it obviously, but before I even created it, that's what I was doing in order to support myself was affirmation and reassuring myself with information and knowledge and reminding myself who I was. With my first line, I have a tendency to get stuck in the I don't know enough, I'm not good enough, all my undefined centers, my undefined heart. I don't and I can't of the things. And I always remind myself that it's okay to know more, to do more, to learn more, but that ultimately I'm going to need to step out. And I also remind myself when I'm feeling like all I see are the cracks in the foundation, because I can really get stuck in that too. I'm not even seeing anything else. I'm just seeing the
Right.
cracks, just seeing what's broken, what's not there, what's missing. And so just like noticing when I'm feeling that sensation in my body, that overwhelm, that anxiety, and being able to be like, okay, you're stuck in this place, and integrate it with all the other parts of my design too, and find where I might need to move some energy or spend some time and sit with myself. And then the third line, I have a hard time actually just letting myself make the mistake without judging myself for it. I know the sixth line is, more concerned with perfectionism and everything, but there's this huge hindrance between this tension between the first and the third line where it's like, you can't go yet because you don't know enough.
Or thinking that the 1-line is like, I should have the wisdom to save myself from this.
Yes, 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 yes. Sometimes I don't realize how much I'm holding myself back from actually getting into the process and letting go and embracing and learning through action. And so I always just, whenever I'm feeling guilt or fear or self-esteem issues around just having to get messy and having to start being part of my process, I actually just make myself do it. I'm just like, too bad, we're jumping in.
Right.
Just like close the door on your first line. We got to go. And I just force myself to do it. And through that and actually taking action is when I actually realize that there's more than the cracks that I'm seeing, and that this is a really valuable part of my process. And like I was even thinking, I'm working with a new virtual assistant client, and I want to be great for them. And I want to be perfect for them. I want to do all this thing. And I'm like, but you're gonna have to, and you're gonna have to navigate.
Right.
And you're going to have to like just go in and make the spreadsheet. And even if they pop in there and it's really messy and it's whatever, at the end, it's not going to be. It's going to be great because you do great work I just have to kind of hype myself up sometimes to go through and be and let my process exist, because I really do get stuck and hold myself back.
And is it that self-talk piece for you? Like, is that the monologue that you're hearing in your head of, I'm just going to do this? Like, come on, we're doing it. We're starting now.
Yeah,
Is that what that looks like? Yeah. I love it.
it really is. It really is. That very specific thing happened today, whereas I'm like, oh no, we're going in. And it was like this, it just, went for it. Because I mean, you just kind of have to. It's like the fear of getting into the pool when it's really cold. And
I
you're
had
like,
a diving board in my mind. Exactly.
yes, yes. The only way to be okay and to acclimate to the temperature of the water is to jump all the way in and not walk slowly.
Yeah.
If you tiptoe, it's miserable. You're freezing. You can feel every nerve in your body. But if you jump in like 3 seconds, you're warm again. So that's me.
That's such a great analogy. How would you say that some of those 1-3 patterns apply specifically to how you run your business? How does
Mm.
that look like on the business front?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of like starting and stopping. And like, I have so many discarded projects, like so many, oh, like this is the thing that I want to do next. And like, it might have as a generator and as an emotional generator, more specifically, I think the third line process kind of goes really well with being an emotional generator, because it gives me the opportunity to experience more things and gain more perspective throughout time, and then like not be that bummed if it ends up not being what I need to spend my energy on or something like that. But yeah, if you were to go into my Canva account, there's hundreds of projects that are started, stopped, probably like a few ones that I will go back to eventually. But it's just that, like, kind of that back and forth. I got to try, I got to get in there, I got to, do my thing. So I think that it's actually been really supportive as an entrepreneur to have the third line as part of my profile, because part of entrepreneurship is just going for it. And in the same vein, that first line, like I remember when I started my account and I started giving readings and everything, I was encouraged to do so by a friend and a coach. At the time, I was doing something completely different. And I was like, but I don't know anything. And they're like, you know a lot. You're really giving basically like on the fly readings to these people in our group. Like, I'd pay you for that. And I'm like, well, okay. And then I remember starting my account and kind of getting into the human design world and being like really nervous, but like just going for it. And then I remember I made a post and it was the heart center. It was like a graphic for the heart center, and the triangle was the wrong way. And I was devastated. I was like, oh, and I like did it for a while. And then, weeks later, I get over it and I post something else. And my account's gaining traction. I'm meeting all these people in the human design space. And like, I made a mistake about something, specifically about profiles. Of course, I remember everything. And somebody corrected me on it. And I was like, no. And then I went back into my like first line shell and read like more and more and made, shored up my foundation even more so that I could go back out there and do it again. So it's just kind of that like back and forth of like being messy, figuring out what I don't know, and then making sure that I do know it. Then, that back and forth.
Yes. Our Canva accounts, if they could speak to each other, it's that they very much understand each other.
Like all these lonely little projects. They're like, but what about me? Wait, don't start new document. Wait,
Yes.
what about me?
Oh, I love it.
We are who we are. What are we going to do?
That's very true. One of those projects that you started is these affirmation cards, this custom human design affirmation deck. I'd love for us to talk about when I first messaged you about the cards, how this is like an idea that I chose to not action on. It's an idea that I had years ago that I never put out there. I never started a Canva doc even. So like it didn't go anywhere. It was just this tiny idea. It was always an idea for someone else and not for me. I remember thinking, I wish someone would make, not me, I wish someone would make a custom human design deck based on my chart. And each of the cards would have like things that were about different elements of my chart. And I wish that was a thing. And then I put that idea out of my mind and then I didn't think about it again. Then I was on Instagram one day and I come across your profile and I see these cards and they're like exactly what I wanted to exist, that I wanted someone to put out into the universe, and you did. And it's not like we talked about it. It's not like I was like, here, take this idea at all. I don't know. I always forget who wrote Big Magic.
Yeah. Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yes, that is correct. You're right. She tells this story in there about this story that she's writing that she abandons. She's no longer writing that book anymore. She gets a call from a friend. They're telling her about this story that they've just read. And it's like detail after detail after detail is the same. And she's like, how though? That idea that like ideas are basically freely floating around in the
Yeah.
universe and choosing us sometimes and choosing other people other times. It's just wild to me. It's still wild. Every time I think about it, every time I'm holding the cards as I record these episodes, I'm thinking about just how beautiful it is.
Crazy. Yeah. Ever since I was a kid, I just assumed that thoughts and ideas floated above our head, kind of on like a music ledger.
Oh, okay.
We went like super visual and just like boop, 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 floated around. And like sometimes we went up and grabbed it and sometimes and then threw it back. And like sometimes, and if you didn't grab it, you wouldn't do it because I couldn't understand how people had the same idea at the same time. I'm like, you're not in there. Like, and I didn't get that idea from anybody. So how did you have the same idea as me? And it's crazy because
Yeah.
my husband and I, he has a defined head and defined ajna, and he and I literally think the same thing at the same time. And it's very weird. Like the exact same thing at the same time. We won't have talked about anything remotely close, and then we'll say the same thing at the same time. So I always just thought like thoughts and ideas were just like, that's how we had the same thoughts. I don't know. That was my very young way of rationalizing with it. But I think it's true because it's very strange. Otherwise, how would that happen? There's literal inventions that exist today that I thought about when I was little. And I was like, this should exist. And it does now. I see commercials for it. I didn't make it.
It's magic. It's gotta be.
The same time that I started my account, the same time my friend was like, you should do human design as your work, all that. I was like, okay, I want to do readings. And my big goal is going to be, I want to make an affirmation deck custom to people's human design. It has always been like, that's it. That's what I wanted to do. And it was so frustrating to me that I couldn't make it work. So years. So this was what I started my account in 2020. So that's like around then, probably more like, I think 2019 is when I started really thinking about it. And then when I was like, okay, I'm actually doing human design because I wanted it for myself. I'm like, I want these affirmations. I need affirmations. Like, that's how I want to know myself. That's how I want to support myself in my design. And anyways, so in 2020 is when I first started really trying to do it. And I couldn't figure out how to do it and it not cost like $20,000. And all of these things, the logistics were horrifying. And I was so frustrated by it. And I was like, well, if I'm a generator and I'm frustrated and I'm stuck and this is going nowhere, I have to put it down. And I was so scared that somebody else was going to pick it back up and that somebody else was going to do this thing that I really, really wanted to do. And I was like, okay, well, that's some ego, stuff. So also got to put that down. Generally just need to work on this whole situation. So I put it down for almost 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And the whole time though, I have this belief that if you put an idea down and it sticks with you, it's yours. If it doesn't, it's not, which is also why I think we have so many Canva documents that are we put it down and then it goes away. And so this idea, I was like, it has to be mine because it's still there. It's still there. 6 months later, it's still there. It's still there. I'm like, okay. Every now and then I'd plug back in and do some more research and still couldn't figure it out. And then have a baby in summer 2022, and then around, I want to say Thanksgiving, I get this I don't know how to describe it. Just this tightening and not tightening, like this feeling in my body. And within 2 months, everything was designed. Everything was written. Over 400 affirmations. Yeah, I can't remember. A lot. So more than that, actually, because I didn't use every single affirmation that I wrote. And I had a plan for how I was going to get them out into the world, which was the hardest part of the logistics, the part that was so frustrating before. It was literally, I researched for like a week. And it was one of the first things that I found. And I was just like, well, I want to keep researching just in case. And it was just the timing. And then January 2023 is when they came out. All of that, sitting it down for 3 years. And then within 2 months, it all just
The right time.
the right time. Not crazy.
Very much.
And I feel like that is very much like generator life in entrepreneurship too. Because sometimes it's just not the right time. And that's so frustrating.
Yes.
Because you want to make it happen and you want it to be the right time and you want to get caught up in the excitement of it. And then when it's not the right time, you're just like, okay, I guess now I have to trust.
Because, you can't force it. Also,
No.
that's not going to work either.
No, because if you send things out into the world through force as a generator, it's just going to end up being frustrating anyways.
Yes.
Something I've also experienced many times as a third line.
Do you have gate 34?
Gate 34. Oh man, I don't
Gate
know.
34, the gift is power and the shadow is force. It's my sun. I'm 34.1.
Look at my chart real fast. that horrible that I don't have it memorized?
No, it's not horrible. It's impossible. Plus, you have everyone else's chart details in your mind at all times.
This is true. No. Oh, no. I know exactly where. No, but my mom does. Yeah. I feel like that was my, like, one of the gates that I really struggle with is my 54 and my undefined root. And like that pressure to like achieve often makes me often succumb to that pressure to try and make things happen before they're ready to happen.
Don't we all? So we probably should have started here. I'm realizing this now, but that's okay. We're doubling back. This is another third line attempt. Can you tell everyone listening about the concept for the cards? I should have let you start there before I jumped in with the whole story.
No, I love it. The concept for the cards is that you, if, what are the details? It's 96 cards that include affirmations for your type, your authority, your profile, and all 9 of your centers. And it's completely custom to those parts of your human design. So it doesn't have gates and channels. That I would love to figure out a way to maybe make like a separate gates and channels deck that you'd get like the whole thing for. And then you can kind of like, throw the ones that you have into your deck. I don't know how to make that work. That's like part 3. Part 2 is kids affirmations card. Part 3 is gates and channels. Part 4 is variable. Since it takes me 3 years to do each one, that will be in like what, 20? But
2040, give or take.
Coming in 2040, guys. But yeah, so the whole idea behind the cards is that you have a deck that's completely custom to your human design that you can pull a card every day and just work into your own rituals and routines. And they're all affirmations. I'm a big affirmations girl. My undefined heart needs them. I know that they're not for everybody, but it's a huge way of how I support myself and my design. And so on the bottom of the cards are also prompts that you can ask yourself if you want to incorporate them into like a journaling practice, or just even ask yourself in the beginning of the day and kind of like ruminate on, that question throughout the day. The only cards that do not have prompts are manifestors. So if you're a manifestor and you order a card, there are no questions because that's not always conducive to a manifestor's process. So yeah, that's the gist. There is like each card also has the shape of the center, but it's kind of, it doesn't say like head center, or it doesn't say, spleen on all of that. So it's supposed to be like a little bit more under the radar. I never wanted them to be like a study tool. I don't want you to look at the card and be like, this is my undefined heart center. Like, I just want you to read the affirmation and sit with that. But for those inquiring minds, those first lines who might want to reference and understand the part of their design that is, those are on there as well.
Okay. Very cool. See, I didn't know that because I only have the ones that relate to profile. I didn't see that element. What was it like embodying all of the aspects of the different possibilities, especially for ones that are outside your own design? What was it like putting together the affirmations for all the cards?
That was like definitely kind of an exercise in trust in my first line knowledge, my third line experience. I've taught human design in course setting, and at some point you just have to believe you know what you know and that what you know is valuable, right? It was honestly like drawing a lot from being my 1-3 self and trusting the knowledge that I had and also the experiences that I had to serve me in that way. I also was definitely really intimidated to write affirmations for manifestors. I want them to feel good for everybody. And I think that there's a lot of people that it's hard to understand how it feels to be them. And I don't want anybody to feel missed. Like, I don't want the cards to be something that are like, oh, I read this today and it's supposed to support me, but instead it just makes me mad. But I also had to release the idea that these would be the perfect tool for everybody, and trust that whoever was drawn to buying these cards, that it was going to serve them a way that it needed to serve them, even if like they got mad at a card one day. Like, that's not really my thing to control.
And that could and does happen with any deck, because I've certainly been incensed when I've pulled certain cards from other decks.
So true. Everything was like a vortex when I was creating it. And it was like, I was so grounded. And so it was really wild. Again, not a manifestor. Don't know what a manifestor urge feels like, but I was just like, this has to be somewhat kind of similar, because I am in this like creative vortex where I feel good and I feel grounded, and it feels like everything's just streaming through me with all the perspective that I need. I definitely am not like that way all the time in my life. But this was like a very specific time of like this creative energy. It was like giving birth. It was like creating and giving birth to something very 59-6 of me. But it was just so different than other times that I, forced the creation of something. The only thing I can think to describe it was that I felt like I was in a vortex and everything just made sense. I didn't struggle with the thoughts that somebody might not like it. Like I sometimes struggle with the thoughts of like, oh, somebody might not like this thing that I made them or whatever. I didn't even struggle with that. It just, if it popped into my mind, then I was quickly settled by the truth that I knew.
Other than the cards and the readings, what other things do you have going on in your business?
I'm slowly, so slowly working on sender's guides for
Okay. Mhm.
parents, but for kids. So I'm doing like a series like of Instagram posts, blogs, and then the most in-depth part, like, if you want baby information, you've got your little Instagram post. If you want a
Mhm.
little bit more information, you got your blog post. If you want Big Daddy, you can have a.
Yeah.
So I'm very slowly working on those. It's fun. My undefined G is kind of shifting identities a little bit in like branding wise with colors, which I'm like sad because my cards are like the current colors that
And isn't
of the
it
brand.
when that happens mid-project?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, I love these colors. But this project doesn't feel like those colors. And so I'm like having this like internal, not battle, but like I just have to keep reminding myself like, it's okay for you to use other colors.
But maybe like you said, the cards for kids were phase 2. Maybe phase 2 just has different colors.
Yeah, maybe phase 2 is just different colors. The cards for kids are going to be a version where you can color them.
Oh, fun.
For kids, they can color their own little affirmation card. Yeah. So there will be a normal color version as well. So that's what I'm working on, TBD on any kind of release date. Cause as I said, it's a very slow process, just limited time. All the other things that I've got swirling are like, these could be cool, but I haven't ridden my wave enough or gotten into the third line messy process enough to like know if it's actually going to stick. So right now it's readings and cards and guides.
That's awesome. Well, the reason we talked so much about the cards is because the cards are going to play an important role on this show. I am really grateful to you because when I was ideating this show, I was thinking about what kind of questions I would ask people that had different profiles and what kinds of topics we would cover. And I started worrying that all of my episodes with 1-3s, for example, would sound really similar, or all of my 2-4 episodes or whatever. I was stuck on this for maybe 2 months of how am I going to make sure that every episode is different enough that it's not boring for people to listen to because it's just like the same interview over and over again. Then I thought about the cards and I thought, hey, what if I had like a special set of the cards that had each of the different profiles and I used them as part of the show and I had them as like a prompt and closing ritual for each of my guests. And so I reached out to you and I didn't want to come on too strong, but I was really excited. Please don't go back and count how many exclamation marks are in those DMs. It would be embarrassing. So I sent you that message and I asked, like, would it be okay if I ordered a special set of the cards and if I used the cards in the show? And you were lovely and you said yes. And you were excited about it too. They're working out so well. And they're becoming a really important part of the show and of each of the different episodes. I wanted to just say a big thank you to you. As listeners are listening to each episode, I feel like people are going to get more and more excited and want a deck of their own. And I want them to be able to do that really easily. So
Yay.
Thank for letting me use them in this way. And I am glad that I get to still help out with the idea and help push it out to the world. I didn't need to be the creator by any means, but I do love being able to hold them in my hands and help other people get to hold them in their hands too.
That's so cool. I also like how like we were universally linked to these things before we ever connected human, but we were just linked by this want and this need. Here we are chatting about it. And that's really cool. So glad you enjoyed them.
I mean, how could you not enjoy them? I need to order myself a deck that's like particular to my chart. So this is the very first time we're doing this on the show. We are going to pull a card for you. The cards I'm holding are from the 1-3 deck, true to your profile. Let's take a deep breath in together and release. The card that I've selected today is what interests me guides me. What is stopping me? Does it feel safe to explore what pulls at me?
Hate it. Love it.
Tell me more.
Oh, it's just like, it's scary to put faith in what you like. And it's also like the most natural thing to do, I think, as a 1-3 is to like just obsess and go for it. And I think that it's hard though, again, talking about my undefined G, like it's hard when identities shift and things change and you have a new interest. And it's like that whole, like you start from a clean slate of not knowing anything and only seeing how much you don't know. It's just hard, but it's a nice reminder to be brave in those things and that what you like to do and what I like to do and what interests me is worth pursuing. Because isn't that what we're here for as a 1-3?
I think so. So if someone's wanting to order a deck or connect with you, where can they do that?
So you can find me on Instagram at glogojuicehd, my web glogojuice.com, and you can order the decks on Etsy right now. And all that is linked on both my website and my Instagram.
It's also linked in every episode of the show, in every bit of the show notes. So
Wow.
it'll be very easy to get your hands on your own deck.
Yay. And there's a made to order version that is like printed for you and it's like official kind of tarot style cards, comes in a little velvet bag and everything. And then that's a little more expensive, but there's also a print at home version, which is more friendly to people who live in like Canada and overseas, or if you have more of a budget, you can print them at home. I've done it several times myself to obviously experiment with it, make sure before I was putting it out to all of you that it works well.
Yeah, it was easy to print. I can say that. I did the print version, but I think, and not to discount the print version, because like it was very convenient up here in Canada to do that. But I think when I order my own deck, I'll probably get the print version just because even though I did print it on heavier cardstock, the way that I cut mine out, I have these little frayed edges that are getting to me. And I know that yours have these beautiful rounded corners and I want those.
They do. It's completely different. They're smaller. You're doing it yourself, but there's plenty of reasons why that might be the version that you need or want. But I do love my made to order deck. I was so pleased with how they turned out. So if that's the version that you want, I love them.
Christina, thank you very much for being the very first guest here on the show. And thank you for your contribution to every episode. Cards have been very exciting.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for all of this and for using my cards and wanting to share them with the world. And it's just so cool. Like I obviously knew that people would pull them and ritualize them in some ways, but to have them be part of something like this, it's really neat. And I just love to see it. So thank you.